The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey guys, welcome. This is George Roberts. Just a small pause, moving some things around. This is the first time we're doing this, and we plan to do it every week going forward in the future, just for trial users, people who are coming in as trials, to help people get started. So you're actually helping us here with this first one, and we'll be shaking out some bugs. So bear with us if we're not as smooth as we need to be as we're going forward. Take notes, ask questions, and it's very possible, since this is just two of you guys there, that we might just open the mics as we go downstream. But let Matthew get started. He's going to make a bit of a presentation here, educational kind of thing, and then we'll see how it goes from there. Okay, Matthew, it's all yours.
So can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if it's actually going or not. Okay, so we're not going to go into real depth on this, on actual investing techniques. It's more of an overview of how the software works and how you move about the various parts of the product. So I'm going to set up a relatively simple scenario. I don't think anything I'm doing in this is going to be what you would do exactly every day, but the process and how I use the software, it does apply no matter what investing technologies you're trying to apply. So this is the main toolbar in HGSI. It lets you get access to all the various modules. And we're going to start off in the designer. The designer, HGSI has a very large group database that backs up the entire product. It includes your own personal user groups, as well as our reference groups, which are updated every day, that have, for example, all the NYSE stocks, all the NASDAQ stocks, all the securities, which is a lot of times you'll spend in there, since it's the group that has all the stuff. In addition, we also have a number of sectors and industries, including all the industry groups that we track, and all the major industries, which are slightly larger groupings of industries, and then the sectors, which are combinations of industries, which you can also see in the sectors by industry list. These groups, they're updated continuously. Every time you update the software daily, the groups can and will change. I mean, obviously they don't, new companies don't come and go that often. We also have groups under HGSI reference groups for the major market indexes. So for example, the Dow industry, the S&P 100, the 1500, the 500. And these groups are good fishing ponds for starting your search. And that's what we're going to do here today. Now, we also have other more specialized groups that contain results of searches and filters on the last day's data. And these are our smart groups and custom groups. We're not going to really talk about them during this webinar, but we will answer questions about that once this presentation part's finished. This is being recorded, and I think we'll have it on the website for everyone to look at as well. So if you miss something and you want to go back, we'll have a recording of this. So the idea here is we've got the S&P 1500, which is a fairly good starting point. It's all the S&P 500, the S&P 400, and the S&P 600 stocks. And so that's small caps, mid caps, and large cap stocks, all into one big list. And so it's a fairly good place to start a search for stocks. And so we're going to create a filter. And so we bring up the filter dialog, and I've already made one for this, but let's delete that. So we have a bunch of filters that ship with the product that are already set up with all sorts of rules, and you're recommended to look at these, but today we're going to actually make a new filter from scratch. So we're going to pick new user filters and then choose new filter, and it brings up the dialog for editing a filter. And so we're going to give it a name, and now the way the filter works is you basically are building a set of rules for looking for a stock. And so the rules are, it's an English sentence. If the field is a certain value, and then another field is another value. So it's a fairly logical way of doing it. Now, we do have a lot of fields, and so you're going to want to really use the search facility to find these fields, because otherwise, I mean, you can expand the all here, and the list of fields available in the product is, I think, over 600 at this point. There's so many fields, even I don't know what most of them are, and that's saying something. So if you have an idea of what you're looking for, you can just type something and it'll find it. And so to start off with this, I'm going to pick a really very simple investing concept, and that is that when the 17-day moving average crosses above the 50-day moving average, it's kind of it's a big sign that the stock has begun to move forward when that short-term moving average moves above the slower 50-day moving average. So let's look for the 17-day moving average. Now, we have a lot of fields using the 17-day moving average, but the one we're interested in here is when the 17-day crossed the 50. And so the data field that best represents that for us is the days since the 17-day crossed the 50. And then that field's value is going to be a number, and 0 means it crossed today. And so we're looking for stocks that just today, the 17 has moved above the 50. And so yesterday it had to be equal or below. And in the filter, when you're building a filter like this, you can open up the preview window to see the stocks that meet that criteria already. Now, in this case, the filter preview defaults to all securities. So I'm going to go here and change this to the major market indexes, S&P 1500. And as you can see, only 16 securities, and this is based on the close, yesterday's close. This is the end of day data. I'm not searching with intraday data on this example. And so only 16 stocks cross the 17 today. And so that's actually a fairly good number of stocks to start looking at. And so instead of building up more rules, now in the filter you can, and then you can add in additional rules and some other criteria, and you can keep building these all the way out. For this, I don't think we need that. 16 is a fairly reasonable size. So I'm going to say okay on this filter, and now I've made a filter, and I press okay, and it applies that to the view. And so now as I switch groups, that filter will apply to whatever group I'm looking at. And so in this case, I want to take these 16 stocks and I want to make my own user group out of them. And so I'm going to do File, Make Group, and Make Group in the designer will take the current group with the filter and create a new group. And so we're going to call this and every one of our groups has an index, and an index is really one of the key features in HGSI. It allows you to analyze a stock, a group of stocks, as opposed to having to look at each individual stock. And since we have indexes on industries and sectors, you can get much bigger pictures of how a group of stocks is performing. So in this case, now I've made this new user group down here, and I'm going to remove the filter because we now have this group of stocks. And so I don't actually need the filter anymore, as I'm going to just focus on working with this. And so I'm going to start looking at this by first I'm going to open up the charting on the index itself. Now, this is the index, and the index is built off of whatever your global index settings, which in this case I think is 2 years and average weighting, and that's set on in the preferences on the main toolbar. So the index is an equal dollar weighted index started 52 weeks from this Friday. And you can see how this group of stocks has done over time. And it's kind of, this last week is not over with yet. And so the bar there isn't quite complete, but it's had a fairly good run since the middle of the month. And this is using just a default view. There's nothing, you know, each in the charting, every time you pick a stock, it views it using the view you've chosen. And obviously we have lots of views you can use. And so one of the things you're going to want to do is to create a view that's specific for the kind of things you're looking for. So in this case, we were looking for the 17-day crossing the 50. And so let's make a new view. And so to make new views, the little icon, the little hand icon is the choose create view. Go in and add a new view. I recommend always giving things a name so you know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you end up with a whole bunch of views all called new view 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it can get very confusing. And so a charting view basically consists of two big parts, the windows themselves and then indicators that live inside those windows. So in a default view, there's a volume window, which you see down here at the bottom, and then the price window, which is up at the top. And so we're going to add indicators to this price window. So you press the add indicator, and just like everything else, there's a search. And so in this case, we're going to add some moving averages. And so you can just type a couple of letters, whatever, you know, some part of the thing. And so the available charting indicators, we have a lot of charting indicators, but most of them, almost all of them work the same kind of way. So we're going to just be sticking with the standard moving average. We also have a special crossover moving average, which would apply in this case, but I'm gonna skip using it just because it's simpler. So we're going to add a moving average to this chart window, and so indicators have options. So in this case, you can pick the field you want to use and the number of periods and the color and all these other kind of details. So I'm going to leave the 17 as a blue line using the close. And so that adds the 17-day moving average. And then I'm going to add a 50-day moving average the same way. And for this one, I'm going to pick another color. Let's go with a brown. And so now when we apply this charting view, you can see we now have two moving averages applied to the charting view, and the blue line just crossed on all of these stocks above the 50-day moving average, which is the brown line. And so as we walk through the various stocks that we found, you'll find that the blue line is just crossed above the 50-day moving average. And if you want to see the details on any of the indicators that you've got in the chart, we have this little data window that you can open, and it'll show you what the value of the indicator is on the day you move the crosshair. And so you can see that the 17-day moving average is just above the 50-day moving average today for this guy. The keyboard will allow you to move back 1 day, which can be fairly handy. You can also use the scroll bar on your mouse to move the window, as well as the window controls. There's a lot of options for how to do the various things. But as you can see, every one of the stocks that the filter found in the designer does meet the criteria that it's just crossed above on yesterday at 6:13, the close of the day yesterday. And with the charting, there's a whole lot more options you can use to make much more complicated charts, to look at a whole lot more options. Our chart window has a number of interesting features. We have this information panel, which right now I'm showing the company data panel, but you can actually, there are a number of different panels that have different information. This one has earnings information. This is revenue and EPS, plus the scorecard values. A little shiny chart that shows the earnings and revenue over the last few quarters. Some information about the sector and industry it's in. This panel has more fundamental numbers if you are interested in those. Some earnings numbers, earnings due date numbers, and you can pick whichever one of these various panels that you'd like to see. You can also remove the entire fundamental data panel if you'd like more room on the chart using the little fundamental data panel here. You can also hide the data window. Generally, every one of the main windows has the main toolbar, which you can also make smaller. There's an option on the main user interface for making this smaller. And then underneath, there's a second toolbar that's specific to the window itself. And almost all the secondary toolbars, they have a group selector where you select the group you want to look at. Then a second selector to select security, and then a third selector which selects the view to use in that window. It's not true for every one of our windows. For example, the warehouse, you don't have a stock selector like this one, but as a rule, they all follow the same format. And almost all of our windows, they have a control for choosing and creating the view, as well as editing the current view. These icons and windows stay fairly consistent across the whole product, so that if you're trying to figure out what to look for, that's really one of the key tricks. When you're working on a charting view, the help will bring up help on that specific charting indicator. So if you're curious about what any of the data fields are, the online help, which also will work when you're offline, will bring up specific help on that individual data field in your browser, and can be really useful if you're kind of wondering what these data fields are. So once you've got a list of stocks, which is what we did originally with our filter, one of the next steps, looking at the stocks individually with the charting, as well as looking at the group of stocks you've found using the warehouse. And the warehouse basically allows you to choose a group using the group drop-down, and each warehouse view has a number of data fields, and data fields can be colored and sorted and essentially ranked based on the various data fields. And so just like in the charting, you need to make a view for it as well. And so we're going to go into the create edit view, and we're going to make a new view with some fields that will help us look at this list of stocks we've just produced. And so the fields here are the same fields that are available in the filter, more or less. There's actually a couple of filter fields that don't have warehouse columns, but generally they share common thing. And so let's add the days since the 50 crossed the EMA. Let's also add the 17-day moving average itself and the 50. And then let's throw in a couple of ranking columns. So we have a relative strength rank and an EPS rank, which might be interesting. Now, obviously, this is a pretty bare bones kind of thing, but you can see that relative strength wise, and relative strength rank is computed against the entire group of stocks in the database. And so these stocks that were just crossing the 50-day moving average today, they're not actually all that well relative strength. Only one of them, this EBS, has a fairly decent relative strength compared to other stocks in the database. But a couple of these guys do have fairly high earnings ranks. And so each field in the warehouse, you can sort the view on those fields. And so the highest ranked stocks at the top, the highest rank using that data field. And so you can, by building a complicated enough view, you can get a real big sense of where these stocks, this group of stocks falls in that category. And so if you're looking at a group of stocks that's, say, an industry group, you can easily see who's the outperforming industry group members without a whole lot of trouble. And so like in this case, it's pretty clear that a few of these stocks have fairly decent earnings and the rest of them not so much. And that may affect your investment decisions. Unless you're purely trading on technicals, these kinds of fields may be more important. And if you are doing just technicals, then you should create warehouse views with just technicals. So then the last big module in HGSI is our ranking module. And the idea here is the ranking module is all based on one of these relative strength types. And the Ian fast and Ian slow are methods of computing relative strength based on the change of the stock's price. All these numbers are based on just the stock's close on a weekly basis. And the Wilder RSI is the same way, as well as just straight out percent change. But then we also have comparative relative strength versus another stock, and it defaults to the S&P 500. And so this compares each one of these stocks to the S&P 500 over the 3-week interval. The big trick to using the ranker is to pick a smaller periods to load, because the more data you have to load, the more stocks you have, the longer it's going to take. So in this case, I've set it to 6 months, and we're going to use the comparative relative strength of just 3 weeks. And so what it does is each week, the stock's close for the week is compared to the relative strength, compared to the S&P 500, and that computes a rating. and those ratings are ranked. And you can see the raw values of the ranking of the rating by going to the raw relative strength. And then we take those raw numbers and we assign them ranking numbers between 99 and 1. And so in this case, you can see that Lumber Liquidators has done fairly well versus the S&P 500. Recently, it's had a little bit of a stub toe there at the beginning of the month. And you can pick any week to sort on that week. So you can see, you can kind of start to see patterns of where a stock has started to pick up and do better. And when it stubbed its toe relative to the S&P 500 in this case. You can also have the relative strength versus just the stocks in this group. And so you can see patterns there as well on a weekly basis across all the stocks. And I think that's all we were planning to cover in this little basic intro.
Yeah, that's about right.
And I may have gone way too fast. I've tried to, I mean, obviously there's a whole lot of depth in, we have a very advanced charting, and Warehouse can view things in various other ways. But this is kind of an overview of the basics of HGSI.
We can open the mics, Matthew, and see if there's any questions.
Sure. I have no idea how to do that.
I can do it from here. Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Clear. Gary, are you there? Okay, it's just you right now, Jim.
Lucky me.
We haven't done this before, and you can tell how awkward it is. I rarely actually use the software this way.
I'm not trying to. Hopefully, nobody takes this the wrong way, but I'm part of. I also joined up Ron's Insiders Club,
yes. And
I would think there is a lot of people in that Skype room that would love to see what you guys just presented, because they're always talking about Ron's updates and everything, and I suspect that some of these people would like to get in there and fine-tune their views and stuff like that on their own. This is fantastic. I can't wait for the video. I'll be watching it over and over again as I become more familiar with this program.
Well, that's good to hear, Jim, because that's the suspicion that we have, is that when somebody new comes into the system, they're immediately thrown into ready-made stuff that's no explanation from how you make it. And I do most of the tech support, and most of the time my questions are about process-oriented things. It's not so much needing help with a strategy as much as it is knowing how to apply the tools and how to find things. So that's why we started this off.
Well, I'm thinking if I was really smart, I could make a living teaching how to use this program.
So how about you, Jim? Do you have any questions? Anything you
Yeah.
What troubles do you have? What troubles do you have, or difficulties that when you're using your software?
There's no real troubles. It's just a matter of there's a lot to remember.
Yes.
And so now we're talking about my brain, so I got to remember where things are to, because I get in there with Ron and them, and they say, yeah, look at this, and I'm like, okay, let me think, and. For them, it's second nature. For me, it may take me several minutes, and it's kind of like when you first learn how to type, you're hunting and pecking to get from point A to point B.
Okay.
But it's just a matter of getting used to the program and where things are and where what you want to see is and how you get it to pop up and show itself. And then what you guys went over today, I'm sitting here thinking, oh man, this is great. I can't wait for this video, because when I know there will be coming a point in time where I would like to customize some of my own screens because of, my individual preferences.
Sure.
Nothing against any of the ones that I'm seeing now, but it's just everybody's like that.
And everything I went over applies no matter how complicated the thing you're looking at. I mean, we made simple views here, but if the same way I made the view is the same way you edit the view. And so you can take the complicated view, you can go into the warehouse and you can go, you can pick the complicated, one of these ridiculously complicated views. You can duplicate it using this duplicate thing.
Yeah.
It'll make a second copy of it so that you don't have to, lose your real thing, and then use the edit. And it's the same thing that I did, only it's got a zillion fields in it. But once you understand the basics of how this works, it starts to not become quite as much. I mean, obviously, these views have tons of data fields, and you may need to do research to figure out what these fields really mean for you. A lot of them are very specific to, we've been developing this software for a very long time, and so a lot of some of the fields in this product are very esoteric and hard to understand. And so, but you don't have to know every field in order to use it. You can, work at your own pace against these things, so that you can make this ridiculously complicated view, which has, hundreds of data fields. Views can also, like in this case, this view actually applies a filter as part of the view. There's a bunch of advanced functionality that the app has, but you don't have to use every advanced feature in order to get results. You can start simple and stay there, even if you can build a set of views and filters and a process that meets the kind of investing you want to do. Ron's process, it's very technical. It has a whole lot of data fields, and I think it's really hard for people to completely follow, why he flagged a bunch of stocks today, versus, kind of building your own, going your own pace on this. I think you can get a lot more insight into how to invest and how to use our software to help you guide that. It doesn't have to be this ridiculously complicated millions of filters and views. You might eventually get to that point, but in the beginning you may be better off, just building things yourself. Expand on simple building blocks to start with.
Keep it simple. It's stupid.
Yeah. Well, don't try to write, War and Peace the first time you start Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word has tons of powerful features, but nobody wants to try to write a thousands page book right off the bat. You kind of got to work up to that point. And this is the same thing applies to us. Whatever you can think of, we probably have something related to it or close to it, but you need to understand the basics to get to that point where it's not quite as big a jump. Diving into the deep end on this stuff can be very confusing. And we think it's one of the biggest problems we have with new trial users is that almost all our learning materials are aimed at a much more, someone who's been using our product for a very long time. And so, it's talking about things that even the most advanced investor may not actually need to know that much about, as opposed to this simple thing that we did today, which I think is probably the world's simplest example. I was worried it would make our product seem too much like a a casual thing, and it's really not. But it doesn't have to be that ridiculously complicated.
Jim,
The
a question from that I'm interested in is when we ship the product, we have a whole lot of default filters, views, and combos in there from different people. And
Mhm.
you get them whether you want them or not. I mean, you can always take things out, but we ship them with everything in it. And I get some feedback that says, there's just too much stuff that we don't know what we're supposed to do with, if anything. It gets in the way. So I'm thinking that I should be shipping it with just what we call the HGSI starters, and you add what you want in. It's always available. You add it. So if you're just following Ron, you would add in Ron stuff. If you were following Ron and Jeffrey, you'd add in Jeffrey stuff. If you were wanting to pick up one of these other things like Morales and Catcher or anyone else, you would just add those things in. It's very similar to what we put in so that you could do that same kind of thing with the smart groups. We're trying to take some of the overload out because we just by default been shipping everything.
I can see that. What brought me to this or to y'all was Gil Morales. I subscribed to his website, and he can't say enough good things about the HGSI software. And I'm like, I see what he's talking about, and if I'm going to be doing what he's doing, and I like what he does, then I like to be comparing apples to apples instead of looking at a chart from, say, someone like stock charts or somebody else. I want to see, what he's seeing. And if I don't have everybody else in there and, I decide I want to look and see, then I can just at my own convenience then download it and look at it. And if it's not something I need or want to pursue, I can just delete it. Yeah, I get that. That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, that's good info for me. Hey,
So,
Gary, are you back? Gary Banks? I guess not.
someone,
Because he asked
I
a
thought I
question.
saw a question, yeah, about using the designer to
Import
it was about
symbols.
import symbols. And so why don't I go over the answers to that question right now? So the question was, and I'm just remembering this off the top of my head because I can't bring up my email while I got this up like
I
this.
can tell you what it is. If you
Sure.
It says, I would like to know if it is possible to import symbols to build a user group and if it is possible to export symbols from a reference group.
Okay. And so the answer is obviously yes, and not just yes, but in a bunch of ways. So, for example, we have if you wanted to export the symbols from one of our groups, let's say you're interested in the 152 securities that make up application software. And so in almost every one of our windows, there's an option to copy the symbols to clipboard under File. And so you can choose to copy it as a comma separated list or as a text column. And the comma separated list and the text column can then be pasted into practically every application you could think of. The text column is recommended for use in Excel. Comma separated lists are better for websites generally that have portfolio options. The comma separated list is the preferred way of doing that. You can also export the symbols using the ASCII utilities. You can export groups as lists. And so what this does is it exports a group of stocks as a list. And so the idea here is, so the copy to clipboard works great on just one group. So you select automotive retailers and you say, I want to copy all those symbols to my clipboard. You say copy, and now all the symbols are in that clipboard and you can paste them. But if you wanted to export the symbols of a bunch of groups, say all the industries, you can use the ASCII utilities to export groups as lists, which will make individual text files out of the symbols in each one of the groups on your hard drive, which you can then take anywhere you'd like to take them. So we've got a lot of power there as far as getting the symbols out of HGSI. Now, getting the symbols into HGSI is similarly easy. So in the add or edit group option, we have the ability to load a list, which will load a text file, which is a list of symbols. You can also paste the list. And well, let me do an example here. Let me bring up Notepad. So if, say you had a list of stocks like this, and you copied it to the clipboard, and then you go to the ad, and you may have copied that from a website or some magazine article that you were reading, you just highlighted the text. And so if you use the paste list option, it'll look at what's in the clipboard and tell you how many securities it found. And you can get errors there, obviously, because if you selected a bunch of text on a web page, there may be things that we couldn't find a symbol that matched. But as you can see here, we do a fairly good job on a comma-separated list of finding it. And then you hit OK, and it adds those stocks to this group. And then you give it a name, or you could just leave it new group if you want it. And then now you have a group with those symbols in it. And you can make an index for them. And so that and the load list, which will load a text file, generally lets you get things into the software pretty much without too much difficulty.
Does that answer your questions, Gary? Yeah, he says, great, thank you. He has another one, Matthew. How can I create a filter to find stocks where RSI and 7 crosses over 50?
Okay, so there may be, we only have, I don't think we have any RSI 17 over 50 crossovers. Let me look. So I don't think we have crossovers between RSIs. We do have various RSI values, but we don't really cross them over. They're mostly just straight up values of the RSI. We don't actually let you see when they cross each other, and this is one of HGSI's strengths and weaknesses, is that the data fields, you cannot script the data fields, and so if we don't have it in the database already, there's no way to actually generate it. And so you can make a chart view that has multiple RSI charting indicators, but you can't actually filter against the math behind those indicators.
He says, okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's very hard to keep the GoToMeeting question stuff. As a rule, when trying to see if we've got an indicator that matches something what you need, the search is definitely your best bet. One of the things that you may notice is that the search can find things that aren't in the name of the indicator. Behind every filter and warehouse field, there's also search tags that are related to it. So, and sometimes they're very descriptive and other times they're not. So you can find things, that don't necessarily have to match the name of the field. Which is why when you type in, say, moving, some words don't match what you would think, because the search terms behind each one of the data fields is actually wider than you'd think. So as a rule, if you're looking for something, type something close to what you're looking at, and you can get a real good idea of everything that's closely related to that, which can be kind of useful when you don't know what our data field's name exactly is.
I think that kind of wraps it up, unless you guys have any other
Yeah.
questions, Gary or Jim. I think we got it, Matthew.
Okay.
This has been very helpful for us. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.